Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beyond the Arc podcast. We have our weekly NBA show today. I'm joined by Cyro and Sam from Hoops Hype. Thanks for coming on, guys. How you doing today?
I'm doing
Good. Thanks
well,
for having
thank
us.
you.
Yeah, we just wanted to talk a little bit about first off, first week takeaways. Some teams start off well, some not. Want to talk about some of the players and just all general observations. And then we want to talk a little bit about the tweet that went out the other day, kind of going at the notion where, everyone kind of plays the same in the NBA with, a lot of threes and the amount of 3-point attempts, per game for teams have just gone dramatically up over the past 5-10 years, and kind of want to break down that whole idea. And then lastly, the G League draft was a couple days ago. So just kind of want to shed a little bit of light on that. How does this process actually work? How does like a Landry Shamet and Matt Ryan end up as the number one and number two overall picks? These are guys have been in the NBA before, so kind of break that down a little bit. But yeah, let's talk about some of the first week takeaways. I think the biggest surprise maybe for all of us is the Lakers starting out 3-0, playing three pretty strong teams in the Timberwolves, Suns, and beating the Kings 131-127. What have you guys liked out of the Lakers so far to start this season?
Let's go first with I think Sam. Sam is actually this year credentialed with the Lakers. So what's your the buzz around the streets there on the media side of things, Sam?
I think I don't know if you guys like familiar with football, but it's kind of like the Chargers bringing in Jim Harbaugh. It kind of like bringing in JJ Redick had kind of changed the tone of the whole team. And that's kind of what happened to the Chargers. Their whole identity is different. The Lakers, everyone's buying in. I don't know if you guys seen some of the games, but there's a lot of movement without the ball. Like LeBron's never been a guy that plays a lot without movement. And I don't know if it took the Lakers giving his son a roster spot to get him to buy in for the season, but that's kind of what like so far like they haven't been doing any losing kids, but he's bought in, like the whole team's bought in. Like they JJ Redick has repeatedly talked about building the team around what AD does best on offense, and you can guys can see that they're putting him in spots where he can dominate the court on offense. Um, yeah, they look really good so far. I'm surprised, but it's like night and day compared to last year so far.
But yeah, what I was going to say is through 3 games right now, they are the fifth best offensive rating, which I think is just going to go ahead and is just telling of how good this offense looks so far. And they're up there with obviously the Celtics being the best, but in terms of points per game, they are also the sixth best scoring offense. So I think that's a huge thing for them. While, their defense has left some room to desire. I think the biggest part about this is they're not necessarily a great three-point shooting team. They are not a top 10 three-point team. They are actually a top field goal attempt team. Nobody else is shooting as much as them except for like 5 other teams. But the Lakers are basically they're looking at this and they're going ahead and just saying, hey, we're going to put shots up, and regardless of if they're threes or shots inside, and a lot of these shots are at the rim, they are just shooting really well. Currently, they have a 49% field goal rate as a team, which is sixth best, which, again, the rest of the teams that are ahead of them are predominantly three-point shooting teams. They are a team that only the Knicks, I think, have a higher field goal percentage than them and shoot less threes, which everybody else who has a higher field goal percentage than them are a predominantly three-point shooting team. So I see it's really telling to see that there are a lot of shots at the rim and just them, like you said, playing through Anthony Davis. And, the weirdest thing is I think how LeBron feels like he's just deferring a lot, but like not in like the way that he's like trying to save energy, but like almost like he's just kind of like, I don't know, like it's not him. In years past. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, he's definitely
He,
not dominating the ball as much.
I think he's just in a way going through the motions. He's picking his spots. It's so early in the season. He kind of wants to get the other guys involved first, kind of hopefully build their confidence as the season goes along. I don't know if you guys noticed, Rui Hachimura has been a lot more aggressive, like getting to the rim. He's playing a little bit more bully ball. Maybe LeBron's helped him out with that in that sense, because LeBron really really good at bully balling, and Rui can kind of play that role if given the chance. He sort of has that mentality where he kind of craters out and like defers to other people. but it's good to see. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, maybe LeBron obviously doesn't want to expend all his energy at the beginning of this season. And I think he's really buying into, that movement that they're really instilling. There's that one action that they've always been running. I think it's called like grenade, right? Where they have like kind of the dead corner with like AD in the corner, and then whoever throws the skip pass to him to AD, and whoever's in the wing, whether it's like an Austin Reeves, like gets a handoff immediately from Anthony Davis. His action that UConn popularized last year, Dan Hurley. So I really like that action. It's cool. Let's see how teams adjust to guard that type of stuff though as the year goes on. Because at the end of the day, like their roster still hasn't really changed a ton from last year. Like yes, you can empower a Rui Hachimura, an Austin Reeves, and a D'Lo to take more responsibility offensively. But as slowly as teams kind of catch up and adjust to what they're doing, are they going to be able to sustain that level of production? I think that's something to keep your eye out for.
I agree with that. And the crazy part is D'Angelo Russell's playing kind of an off-guard role while they have Reeves being on ball. Like Reeves is actually facilitating a lot more for them. So I think that's interesting. And also, Dalton Connect's kind of been their sixth man off the bench, coming in and just being the microwave. So hopefully that can be sustainable as, he's a rookie.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just like let's see, how this is in a month or two from now. Are they still going to be able to score the ball like this? Are they going to have is LeBron and AD going to have the energy by that point to do what they've been doing? Like, because if there's any fall off there, I think this team's in a lot of trouble. Or maybe JJ Redick is this type of floor raising coach that immediately injects whatever thoughts and ideas he has into and philosophies just into this team, and this whatever team he coaches has some just like instant win boost just purely off of that. Of course it's only 3 games into the season, but I think it's been all positive signs for sure. Yeah, Sam, anything else you've picked up maybe at pressers, talking to people, anything like that?
I don't know if you guys saw a tweet by Baron Davis yesterday, but he saw JJ Redick at the car wash. I don't know if you guys saw that. But he had his laptop out and he's watching game film. And then yesterday at the game, some media member asked JJ about that, and he confirmed it. And then he said something along the lines of, like it's a back-to-back. Like I have to take my kids to school. I don't have a lot of time, so I usually don't do that. But because I was in a time crunch, I needed to kind of prepare and stuff. And like on Twitter, people were like, how the commenters on Twitter, they're saying like this is like night and day compared to Darvin Ham, and then they were saying like Darvin Ham would have said like "Go hard, guys, salute," and that whole joke that with Darvin Ham. But it's just bringing in a guy that can coach with a lot of like the players can tell, like everyone, the fans can tell, like this guy actually cares. He probably stays up all night, reading up everything, thinking of adjustments and stuff. So in terms of like a long-term thing, he might be a good like long-term fit for the Lakers, which you don't really hear about coaches for the Lakers, but we'll see.
Yeah, especially
Sam's really high on. That's it. Sam's really high on JJ.
A week ago I would not have said the same stuff, but I'm like, wow, this is crazy. The difference it's been from this year compared to the last 3-4 years, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he basically built his whole podcasting off of being a little bit more in depth, providing more X's and O's type analysis, like the whole Mind the Game pod. What they did, what did they end up like 4 total episodes by the end or something like that?
Yeah.
Like. They didn't do that many, but that's what that podcast was all about, which shows hey, he really cares about the X's and O's side of basketball. I'm not saying that other coaches don't. Like if you're in coaching, you definitely do to some extent, but it's just something I feel like he's really actually passionate about. Kind of trying to figure that stuff out. Yeah. Anything else on the Lakers, or we can move on to a different team?
Go ahead. You can go ahead.
Yes, Cyro, you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen from the Atlanta Hawks, because that was a team, you've said previously that that's a big surprise team. You think they're going to surprise some people out east. What have you liked from them so far this season?
I think the most evident thing, first off, everybody is finally their sentiments turning back to Trae Young. Trae Young is an offensive engine himself, and people are Again, realizing that for some reason it seemed like the past 2 years people forgot that, but that's not the main point that we're going to talk about. It's actually the arrival of Dyson Daniels. First off, Dyson Daniels actually scoring well. But the second thing, it's really Dyson Daniels, even if the scoring doesn't hold up, it's the fact that he looks like a lockdown defender. If you've seen, every championship team or the teams that have arrived, the Marcus Smarts, the Alex Carusos, the Drew Holidays, the Lou Dorts, Dyson Daniels, through the 2 games we've seen, has looked like that guy for the Hawks, as a guy that is going to be guarding the opposing team's best player on the perimeter. He can guard easily, I think 1 through 4 it seems. I don't think he can guard all 4s, but some 4s. But just his point of attackness, he does this thing where he puts his hand on the opposing player's hip. If you watch him and he keeps his hand there, he does a really good job at doing that, basically just carrying the guy and keeping him in front. And it's just been fantastic for them. And they've been running this lineup with Jalen Johnson, Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, DeAndre Hunter, and Clint Capella starting lineup. And then you have Onyeka Okongwu coming off the bench, who's been also absolutely phenomenal himself, which I expect by the end of the year, unless they really like Onyeka coming off the bench, that Onyeka takes Clint's job and Clint comes off the bench, or even if they trade Clint and then bring in a cheaper big man. For example, like if you send somehow Clint to a team that's desperate, maybe like the Pelicans, I don't know how you get that money done, but I don't think it's possible. But like just the idea of I could see them fully investing into Onyeka because of how this is going. Nothing wrong with Clint. Clint's been fantastic, but they're just starting him, and Onyeka's playing majority of the minutes. Bogdan has been their 6th man as well as their backup point guard at the same time. And then you also have Zachary Rissochet, who, the shooting numbers are real bad for him, but he's out there. He's trying to find the other little small things. And then Crichet's another great defender they have. Same thing with Garrison Matthews, his ability to get deflections. It's just so they have a lot of just guys. Basically, outside of Trae Young, they have Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan, Garrison Matthews, Vic Crichet, and Zachary Rissochet, 7 dudes who are all just positionless. And then you just throw in 2 bigs, Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella, and they're just it's really fun. It's really fun. They're just doing a really good job of being a good team that they're not even a great rebounding team, but they're just an efficient team. They're the best free throw team. They're the best, team at right now, number 1 in blocks, one of the top scoring teams. Just really interesting, really good offense. That's it. I'm done with my rant.
Yeah, they're number 7 right now in offensive rating according to NBA.com, and 15th defensively. Obviously very small sample size, but their defense the past couple years have been concerned, and their offensive production hasn't really helped make up for that. So if they can stay, get around a top 5 offense, which I think is totally possible with Trae Young kind of leading them, I think they'll be in a good spot. But just looking at their roster, so I think Bogdanovich didn't play their last game against Charlotte. He's already hurt. And injuries have always been kind of a thing with him. Even remember back to their Eastern Conference Finals playoff run, I think 2 or 3 seasons ago, he was pretty hamstrung then too with injuries. But do you guys think they have enough shooting on that roster? Because I'm just looking at their starting lineup, right? You have Daniels, who historically hasn't been a great shooter. We'll see how he is now. Hunter's never really been a volume 3-point guy. He's more of he likes to put the ball on the floor. He has more of a mid-range game. And then Jalen Johnson, his shooting too, it's a little bit on the unproven side. He's definitely gotten better. I actually have I have a podcast coming out with a shooting coach I did, and we kind of broke down Jalen Johnson's shot, and he says, yeah, there's been a big difference in his shot from last year to this year, and just in terms of just pure mechanics. But at the end of the day, still has to prove it in season. But yeah, just on that whole, do they have enough shooting around Trae Young to really maximize this offense, you think?
I don't know, because right now Jalen Johnson's had a poor start to the year. He's been super aggressive, but the shot's not falling and stuff like that. But he's looked really aggressive at moments. He's right now, again, his shooting splits are bad, but I think that's easily going to be something that he can do to turn it around. I think the crazy part is the fact that they have the 7th best offense and they're a bottom 10 3-point shooting team through 2 games. I think goes to show the type of offensive nucleus Trae Young is, that he could be able to counteract that. But I do think it's concerning, especially if an injury happens to a guy like I don't know where, and Kobe Buffkin got hurt. So I think it's definitely, I think there is a concern that if these these little teasers we're getting of maybe some guys taking a jump like a Dyson Daniels and a Jalen Johnson, if it doesn't actually come to fruition, this castle could be built on sand, if that makes
It's an
sense.
interesting analogy. Castle built on sand.
Yeah,
That's-
it's just.
or metaphor.
Yeah, it's just like it could just be like it could be like a flash, like it's just something that could be there, but it's not sustainable because of like what you said. That like as soon as they just start shooting, like where's the offensive production going to come from? If Jalen Johnson isn't that 20-point scorer, if the Onyeka Okongwu doesn't, like right now, like is this production sustainable from Dyson Daniels and Onyeka Okongwu? Will Jalen Johnson and Zachary Ricochet get up? Will Bogdan be healthy? There's question marks, and I agree. That's why. Big questions. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Jalen Johnson actually did shoot 7 of 8 from 3 in the preseason through 3 games. So just based off that, and we looked at his like preseason shooting, he was making shots. But yeah, of course, he's 1 of 7 now to start the season. Yeah, Sam, what were you gonna say?
Well, we'll know in a couple of hours because they're playing the Thunder and they played the Hornets and the Nets earlier to start the season, and defensively, they're not elite teams like that. So
True.
I feel like tonight will be a good test to see how good they are. But I'm sure they'll go through their ebbs and flows throughout the season. But hopefully, it seems like they're headed in the right direction compared to the last couple of years for the Hawks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we can move on from the Hawks now. Sam, me and Cyro both had a team. Do you have a third team maybe that you wanted to bring up before we get into other stuff?
Orlando looks pretty good so far this year. I'm pretty sure you guys noticed. Honestly, I haven't gotten a chance to watch a lot of the East Coast teams, just because when you go to games and stuff, you just kind of get lost into everything. But from what I've seen, just the limited stuff with the Magic, I believe they played. Do you guys remember who the Magic played?
Brooklyn Grizzlies.
Okay, the Grizzlies they look pretty. I didn't watch much of the Grizzlies games. I don't know if you guys did. But the Magic, I feel like this year will be pretty like. I could see them jumping into that top 5 range, top 6 to be too conservative. But they have like Franz. I think last year he shot like what, like something like 20 something percent from 3.
His three ball was not there.
I feel like last year was more of an outlier because throughout his career he was more in the 30s, I believe, like the mid to the high 30s. I'm not really sure though, but once that kind of because I feel like last year was an outlier, I feel like it's gonna go back to kind of what his career is, and you have Banchero's gonna develop more. Jalen Suggs, he's got his contract. Jonathan Isaac, when he's healthy, like that guy defensively he's a great point of attack, a defender and everything. And I just feel like all the younger guys, they got KCP now, so they kind of got that older kind of leadership and stuff. But yeah, that's really what I just wanted to bring up Orlando.
Yeah. So far this season, Franz Wagner is shooting 45% from 3 through 3 games. Was 4 of 10 against the Grizzlies, 3 of 6 against Brooklyn and Miami. And then in the preseason, actually, he didn't make a single 3, too. So he kind of turned things around at the start of the season. And then, last year he shot pretty poorly from 3. Trying to find the number here, 28% from 3, so under 30%. But he still shot 85 from the line. And he's been around 84% from the free throw line every single year. And if you're looking at free throws as a indicator of how good of a shooter he is, you can kind of just call last year maybe an outlier. He was 35 and 36% the 2 prior years before that. So if he's shooting the ball, that's also just a really big lineup too for the Magic. Like their starting lineup, like Jalen Suggs, KCP are both bigger guards. Then you have Franz and Paulo Banchero. And then
Wendell Carter
as well, and then last year they tried this too with Jonathan Isaac at the 5 against Cleveland. I don't think that worked great.
Yeah,
but that is something you could go to, and that's
they're running.
Mm-hmm. That's a very switchable lineup that they could run.
Well, even now they've introduced Anthony Black through 3 games, who he's been coming in for a little bit both of Jalen Suggs and I think it's a little bit of Contavious Caldwell-Pope at times as well as they sprinkle in some Gary Harris there. But Anthony Black so far, he comes in for like a few minutes a night and he does a little bit of everything and He's a guy that I was real big fan of his coming out of Arkansas. I really like his game. I know we've only seen Jonathan Isaac one game, so can't really take him. And Cole Anthony hasn't been that affected. So for me, I wouldn't. I really Franz Wagner, if he can keep this up, he's taking that step towards all-star level, maybe even more, which they needed to become a team that goes from being playoff team last year to maybe something more. And Mo Wagner is looking like an insane sixth man. I think my biggest question right now when I look at this team, and I love Paulo Banchero, does this team, okay, when we look at them with Franz, with Paulo, and I just, what is there, okay, is that enough, if that makes sense? Like those two guys being the spirit, as when we get through the year, if Paulo can stay at an MVP level and Franz can stay at this level, is that enough? Because can we agree there isn't really a pure third option? Like I like Jalen Suggs, I like Mo Wagner, I like Anthony Black, I like Gary Harris, Wendell Carter, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Jonathan Isaac, and Cole Anthony, but we can agree that none of those guys would be the third option if, let's say, teams shut down Franz Wagner, Apollo, or they have a bad night, right? Or do you believe that Jalen Suggs or somebody else can be that guy?
No, I agree.
I mean,
I agree with what you said.
yeah,
They need a
yeah,
new guy, and they have pieces to trade if they wanted. So we'll see how they go about it.
yeah. They're probably one trade away from being that true Eastern Conference contender. Just like you said, Paulo and Franz right now are probably a little bit too up and down offensively. Like you don't see Paulo dropping 20 plus on efficient shooting every night. And if you just look at his like physicality and skill level, you're like, hey, this guy probably should be. But I don't think he's entirely there yet in terms of like a shot making perspective. And I think that was kind of the concern coming out of Duke, right? And I think that's why Jabari Smith at that time was in chat, was getting number one overall buzz over Paulo until like the day of the draft. That might have been just a smokescreen or whatever. But it was just like, can this guy efficiently create shots for himself once he gets to the NBA level? Is he going to be a guy like more like a Julius Randle type who really relies on his physicality to score? I personally think in the long run, Paul is going to be good enough. I think he's, supremely skilled, and I really like his passing vision. So if you double, he's going to make the right pass all the time. But can he draw that extra defender, constantly, even when he's not against a mismatch? Like can he just be that undeniable of a scorer? I think that's the thing they're going to have to figure out over the next couple of seasons. But they got time. They're such a young team, and like Sam said, they're pretty flexible right now in terms of what directions they can pivot with the amount of kind of mid-tier salaries they have. Yeah, I think you're muted, Cyro.
I hate how this thing's like. I keep thinking I hit mute, but I don't. But the thing is I think Paulo, if he takes that MVP step, that's the biggest thing. Like, I think the whole thing that this hinges on is Franz and Paulo taking steps to the next level. For Paulo, it's becoming like an MVP guy, and for Franz, it's becoming an actual second option. And then, like you said, it's looking on the market for that third piece. Now, who is that third piece? I don't think it's Zach LaVine. I don't think it's Jeremy Grant. I don't think it's Chris Middleton. And I don't know who's going to be available for trade. Are you going to go out and try to get a Jalen Green? Who's that third piece? I thought Paul George was kind of cool thinking if that was the guy they got and had Paul George be the third guy, but I don't know who you're going to trade for. But I do believe that with Cole Anthony and Jonathan Isaac and stuff, they have the contracts to make that move.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, Zach LaVine, I kind of like the idea of that, but he might be a little bit too injury prone, might not be on the same age range as everyone else. But yeah, let's see. There's always some guy that pops up in trade rumors, at some point during the season. It was like Bradley Beal before. Last season, I'm trying to remember who it was. It wasn't Paul George, right, last season?
Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, we could move on now from early season takeaways. So there was a tweet I saw yesterday. Wanted to get your guys' opinions on it. I'll read it out loud right now. It's from Miles Brown on Twitter. He said, "This isn't complicated. Every team used to have a style of play that maximized their personnel. Now it's just 30 teams doing the same thing no matter who's on the roster. It's boring. It's a bad product. And you people trying to act as though this is nuanced for engagement are liars." And then I'll add this to it. He replied to himself and said, "I don't hate the Celtics, and I understand teams run different sets. But if the end result is both teams taking 43s a night, then what are we really talking about here? I go left, you go right. We end up in the same place. So I think this is October 25th. So I think this was around the time when the Celtics played the Knicks and almost set the the record for amount of three. They tied the NBA record for threes made in a game with 29. So I assume this was kind of in reaction to that. But yeah, what are initial thoughts on that tweet from you guys?
I think the great tweet that was in response by John Javelinica, or whatever you say his name, he put up the shot profiles between 2004, 2014, and 2024. And he basically said, what style did the 2000 play that was different to personnel other than having a bigger percent of 14-plus shots, which is basically long twos, instead of corner threes and a handful of pull-up twos being also pull-up three-pointers, is basically just now is just instead of you seeing guys just like Kobe Bryant take the ball, dribble into like the top of the elbow, and just back up, take the clock down to like 8 seconds, and then just fade away, turn around long two, or give the ball to a guy like a Shaq or an Amari Stoudemire or somebody else that just took the ball at the low block, just dribbled until they got into a good drop step area, or like the Al Jeffersons. Now you have a guy, you push the pace, you swing the ball around, you find the highest percentage shot, either that being a quick dunk or a quick layup or just a three-point shot. I just think it's better basketball. I think it's boring. Just if you want to watch that basketball, you watch college basketball. College basketball is what basketball used to be. There's a reason why there's a difference, and that's it. I think it's not that the profile. It's just the shot profile has changed. It's not the style. It's still the best athletes. They're just being more efficient about their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think the thing is, for a lot of casual people, when they watch it, they just see a lot of people checking up threes and stuff. Like my dad talks about it. He's like, oh, all I see now is just every team just shooting threes and stuff. But I mean, there's a lot of X's and O's that goes into how they formulate good-looking threes and stuff. But casuals don't understand that. They just kind of see it from the lens of, oh, someone's checking up a three, someone thinks he's Steph Curry. But I mean, it's kind of, in a way, it's like with other sports, like baseball, right? When you have these sabermetrics thing, and then you got guys going 7 innings now. They don't go complete games. A lefty comes in, so you throw in a lefty pitcher. Like a lot of just based off numbers. Like they just look at the sample size and it's like, oh, this is what we should do numbers wise. Basketball the same way, right? You rather take a three than a mid range two and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like there's always just gonna be like the old head just being like, nah, it was better when Kobe was shooting a long two fadeaway kind of stuff. Like I personally did not like that brand of basketball, but so I guess some people do. Or like even Michael Jordan, right? When he played, like the shots he took were pretty inefficient. Like a long two, fadeaway jumper, like a 22 footer. But nowadays he's just like do it from the 3-point line and stuff. So, yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, it does seem like it gets really polarizing, which I don't feel like it needs to. You can take just bits and pieces of both sides, where you can take and make it into like something that's nice, right? Like basketball now is not, to me, it's not bad watching. There's a lot of different teams have different play actions they run and stuff. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I get it from if you're, like you said, Sam, if you're a casual watching the game and it's kind of a repetitive style play in terms of the outcomes of most possessions are ending up being 3-point shots, which is like, okay, like, I don't know how much of it is like them actually watching the game, that's what they're observing, or is this just kind of like a narrative that's kind of perpetuated on social media and just like media in general, and people are just kind of saying what they hear. I think maybe it's a little bit of both. I think, there are a lot of 3-point shots, but if you're actually watching the game, like you see the way teams get to that are very different. It really depends on who your star is. Do you have like a Paulo or like a LeBron or someone like just like physically dominant who's, drawing defenses, kicking it out? Or are you like the Warriors where the ball's flowing, you're running off screens, you're generating 3-point shots like that? So I think there's a lot of nuance within that. But again, in terms of outcomes, it does end up being a lot of 3-point shots. But then with the whole thing about like the mid range and like post ups dying, I think it's just the guys that are not good at those shots are not taking, or they're instructed not to take those anymore. Like a DeMar DeRozan, his mid-range shot is still more efficient than most players in terms of a points per possession basis. It's better than some guys shooting a three or like trying to drive to the basket or just like their post-ups, which is why he can take those shots. Like I don't think anyone's telling DeMar DeRozan, hey, like stop shooting mid-range shots.
Exactly.
That's his game. Now he's been told like, hey, you might want to up your three-point volume a little bit. He's been told that in the past, and he said that openly in interviews. But it's like he's like, hey, like that's not really my game. That might make me less efficient. So I'm gonna stick with what I am comfortable with. And even then, though, he's still shooting some threes sometimes. Like not like he can't shoot them. Like he's more comfortable driving.
No,
the
he
ball.
became a good.
Yeah, he's not bad.
I think he's back at the shooting threes. I think it was in San Antonio. He just stopped shooting 3-pointers, and he was like almost a 60%, or he's like 55% field goal shooter because he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna shoot like half a three a game or 1 3 a game, and he was literally their point guard, just like
he was a ball
running,
handler there.
like he was a ball handler, and he was literally just shooting mid rangers. And like you said, I think certain guys are there. Robin Lopez. Most guys don't have a hook shot, but Robin Lopez is out there still going with that hook. Zach Edey's known for his hook shot. People aren't telling him to stop his hook shot. You're not going to tell Daniel Gafford to take a hook shot. You're going to tell him to dunk the fucking ball and to avoid it. And I think it's what you said. If you're good at a skill, like example, Xavier Simpson does a sky hook at 6 foot. You're not going to tell anybody else to do a sky hook in the NBA, but if it works and it's shooting at an efficient level, people aren't going to tell you, but they're going to tell the majority of people, hey, this is the most efficient way to play, and this is going to keep you in the NBA, and this is going to keep you in the league. So you should probably take these shots, you know what I mean, or play within this shot like profile, which is going to like, maximize your impact on the floor offensively as a role player.
Yeah. Yeah, and you do see some players kind of speaking out against that, saying, hey, like this team, they're putting me in a box in terms of like what I'm able to do as a player, and they feel a little bit restrictive, and that makes them just play overall worse. So I think maybe there's area for improvement for teams to explain to players, like make it clear to them, hey, this is actually going to make you a better player. This is actually going to make you more money down the line. Now, when you start bringing that stuff in, I think players are going to buy in a little bit more. If you're just telling them, hey, like, don't do this, don't do that, like, they're probably not going to be too accepting. But if you're like, hey, this is going to, help us win, this is going to help you look better from a statistical profile, it's going to make you more money down the line, I think they'll buy into that a little bit more. The one thing that John Jablanca, the stats that you were referencing, Cyro, that was pretty interesting to me. If you look at rim frequency and rim field goal percentage, so rim frequency has dipped about 3% since 2000. It went from 31 to 32. Now it's down to 29%. But at the same time, rim field goal percentage has gone up from 58 to 66, which means, like, yes, people are getting to the rim a little bit less or taking less shots at the rim, but the looks they're getting are dramatically more efficient than they were 20 years ago. So I think that's a pretty interesting takeaway from that. And that's something here at Cal Poly, like this coach has talked about, like his Division II team last year, Colorado Mesa. His name is Mike DeGeorge. His team was last in the nation in Division II in amount of 2-point field goals attempted, but they were first in 2-point field goal percentage. And they play heavily into that, like, analytically driven style of play where there's not a lot of mid ranges. If you don't have a clean look at the basket, it's a kick out and then a redrive or a three. So with the whole growth of the 3-point shot, that also, that opens up the rim for better, cleaner rim opportunities. So that's the last thing I wanted to bring up on that. But yeah, I think, there's obviously valid points on both sides about, casual seeing like, hey, it's just threes going up. But I think if people are actually watching the games, they'll see how they get to those shots are a little bit, it's very nuanced in that way. Yeah, anything else you guys want to add about this whole topic before we go to the G League draft?
No, I agree. I agree with what you said, like the rim frequency is there, but I just think, again, like, it's just like, would you go for the 2 points or would you go for the 3 points? I think that's just more the thought. It's just like, I don't know, like, I just think it's just being smarter, and it's about sometimes, like, especially like for bad teams, like if you're bad defensively, you're not going to win a game by getting stops. You're going to win the game by, at that point, just out shooting the other team. So sometimes I think that's just kind of the thought process going into it.
Yeah, and that's what you see from bad teams. Like if you're like a Detroit where you can't get stops, and on the other end you can't generate 3-point looks, and not only that, you don't have good 3-point shooters. That's why you're a bad team. Yeah. So it is a bit of a trade-off game there. But yeah, we can move on now to the G League draft. So that draft just happened yesterday on Saturday. You broke some news, Ciro, on that I saw about. I forgot what team who you broke news about.
Chandler Hutchinson and Alonzo Trey both had to enter the draft last week, and Chandler Hutchinson ended up going 5th overall to the Long Island Nets, and then 22nd overall was the Alonzo Trier, 22nd overall in the second round. Alonzo Trier, I believe, went to the Rio Grande Valley Vipers.
Yeah, I haven't heard those names in such a long time. Like Chandler.
Yeah, I know, but like.
So yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, do you want to shed a little
Go.
bit more light here on how that process works? Like how are these like guys who are formerly in the NBA ending up in this G League draft? Like, aren't they always eligible? Like, I don't maybe explain that process a little bit more for people who don't know.
So G League draft is every team can nominate 2 players. So if you're in the draft pool, you're nominated by said team. So that's how the pool is created, and which is you can obviously see the flaws in that and the benefits. You get guys that but either way, most people drafted don't even make the G League roster. G League camp starts tomorrow. You'll see like most of the first round picks, most of the people drafted will get cut. And some of the guys you'll see have been drafted before in the G League. But Landry Shamet and Matt Ryan were both entered day of or the day before the draft, and then the Winchester Knicks traded and got themselves the first and second pick. They basically don't. Landry Shamet's hurt. He's rehabbing. Matt Ryan, I think they just want to get him into the system and stuff like that. And basically, this way they can just have him within their organization and have him around. So when they do sign him, probably in the next coming weeks, they're already working out rehabbing with the G League team. That's why you see Matt Ryan and Landry Shamet go there. Now, the rest of the guys, you see like a guy like Sean East. He suffered a wrist injury, but you had him. He went 3rd overall. He's a guy that, these are guys that, they passed up on going overseas and they wanted to stay in the G League. Last year, EJ Harkless, who just got released from his 2-way with the Clippers, was drafted in the G League, and then he ended up ending the year on a 2-way with the Clippers. And just another pathway to get there. I mean, you had a guy, Jermaine the guy who dropped.
I can't help
Oregon.
you, sir. I have no idea who that guy is.
Jermaine Crosenard. Jermaine Crosenard, right? The guy who was on Oregon, he dropped 40 in the tournament this past year.
Not ringing.
You don't remember that?
No,
Okay,
not ringing
right.
a bell.
He last minute he had some mess up. Like Kevin Cross played one game in Germany and then he got cut and he came back and joined the G League draft. And you had guys like, who else? Seth Maxwell, who played like NIA basketball and was playing in Romania last year for Rostavia, and he ended up going 11th overall. He's like a 235-pound 7-footer with a smooth mid-range game, and moves pretty well for his size. Nice, weak side rim protection. So you got guys that like you'll never hear of. Or like, Cam Parker out of last year. He played for Portland State. Before that, he was with Montana. And before that, he was at Sacred Heart. And then last year, he got signed by a Japanese Division III team, Tokyo. And he played in Japan for a year. And then he came over this year. He got taken in the second round, but keep an eye out on him. Cam Parker is going to be real. He's going to be a fun guy. I think he got picked up by, who did Cam Parker? I think the Nuggets took him. I want to say Grand Rapids.
Cameron Parker, right?
Yeah, Cameron Parker.
Magic.
Magic, that's a good pickup for that. Osceola got him. That's a good pickup right there. Cam Martin, former KU player, then Boise State. He's been a backup at the Division I level, but at D2, he was a 24-point-per-game scorer, like 9 rebounds, 6'9", front court player, similar body type to like a Daniel Tice. So you got G League guys, and it's like very weird minutia stuff, like Terrion Darlin, who went 4th overall to
Portland, to Rip City.
Portland, yep, Rip City. He was a G League guy last year. He was in the G League Elite camp with the G League, and he played last year with the G League Ignite, and then he went to Africa and played in the BAL. And he's a point forward. He's going to be a draft guy next year. He'll be into the draft. And London Johnson, who I thought personally was the best player of the draft, went 21 to the Maine Celtics. He was a guy that he was playing I personally think he's played out of position. He played out of position last year, but he didn't do too terrible playing point guard. I think he's more of a combo guard in the lines of like Alani Walker with more ball handling experience, ball handling potential. But he's a guy that there's a couple draft eligible guys who are going to be in the draft. Like last year, you had Tiafali Leonard, who was in this draft, and I think Tiafali's gone overseas. Same thing with Isaiah Mosley, who were both first round draft picks. So. The biggest problem with the G League, where this year he saw Jalen Gainey, who was an Ivy League two-time Defensive Player of the Year, who played for Florida State last year, but has like red flags because of his knees. You got Nate Roberts, former Washington Huskies player. You have also, who else was in that draft that I really like? Ibrahima Diola, who got drafted by the Austin Spurs. That guy is insane. Played for Central Florida, past 67 games. He's averaged in 18 minutes a night, 7 points, 7 rebounds, and like 2 blocks a game in 18 minutes a game through his last 67 college games. That guy's going to make it to the NBA. That guy's going to be like a solid player. So for people like me, you kind of nerd out and and you talk about this. Like Malik Hall went to the Swarm. I really like that pick. I really like EJ Montgomery going in the second round. I think he ended up on the Clippers. So you got stuff. It's just like really minutia basketball. And half of those guys won't make the team. Half of those guys are just going to be somewhere overseas, but you bring in bodies for training camp, and it's so weird, and you're just trying to fill out your roster, and maybe one or two of these guys will make it two-way. Like a good story is like EJ Harkless or Will Richardson, who was with Grand Rapid, and then they signed him to an E10 this year after he played all last season with their G League team. So they gave him basically a $50K bonus because he got cut during training camp. It's really nerdy basketball stuff that like if you're really trying to like make a jump into media or make a jump into scouting, like get into G League basketball, baby.
Yeah. Those I'm not gonna lie. Like I feel like I know a lot of names. A lot of those guys you said, I don't know who they are, to be honest. I mean, what's interesting to me is just like the overall, like I guess you have like a Landry Shamet who was literally on like an NBA roster last year, and then you have like an NAIA, like you got a player that you brought up as well. I guess what percentage of these guys actually end up being on a G League roster then? Like not many.
I mean, not many. Like last year's number one pick was freaking, what do you call it? Jack White. Jack White was the number one pick last year, and what did he play? I don't know. Even, I think he played with the South Bay Lakers.
Oh, he was. He was on a 2-way with Denver though, right? A couple of seasons ago.
Yeah, and then Denver didn't re-sign him, and then he got that big deal with OKC, and they basically paid him $4 million to cut him after training camp. And it's weird. I would say less than 5%. I say 1% of the guys drafted will make the team. I say, there was 2 rounds. I mean, dude, the Heat had the Sioux Falls Skyforce had 3 first-round picks. They passed on their 3rd pick. They said, we're not going to pick for a 3rd time in the 1st round.
Yeah.
And they'll probably cut one of their guys.
Yeah.
All right. Last year they drafted Bryson Warren, and I think they brought Bryson Warren back. So, I mean, this is a better draft class than last year. But, yeah, I expect less than 5%, maybe 1%, maybe less than 1%. Most of these guys won't even make the G League team. They were just bodies.
So what's the point of this draft then? Because if they're not even building the rosters through this, they're just building it through just guys they sign.
A lot of minutia stuff. Like a year ago, I remember there was like a guy he played summer league with a team, but then he signed an E10 with another team. But because of like G League rules, because you play with a summer league team, your G League rights are owned by the team you played summer league rights. So when he got he had to get drafted by this team in the G League. So then his G League draft rights would then be acquired by the team that he had signed an E10. That way he could get the $50,000 bonus. So even though he should have gone like top 5, I think he went 15th overall because everyone had a handshake agreement because they would have screwed the guy out of $50,000 to not draft this guy because his agent, that team's GM convinced, guilted everybody else, to not draft that guy. And then you have other things like that where it's just set up. Like the Capitanes only drafts Hispanic players. So if you look at the Capitanes, the player might be shit, but he might be the only Hispanic player in the draft, so they'll just draft him because he's Hispanic.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a lot of minutia. It sounds like a lot of handshake agreements too. Like even more because I know the NBA, the second round primarily, there's a lot of handshake stuff going on behind closed doors. But I feel like the G League draft is just filled with that from top to bottom.
My boy, I will say, so I know a trade that happened. They traded a trade for an international draft pick. I think some sort of consideration, like such weird shit that you've never heard involved in a trade. It's just so dumb, and you're just like, he's like, and that's the best offer we could have gotten. And I was like, that's basically sounds like they could have just thrown in a 12 pack of soda in there too. Like it's just like like it's
Yeah. So like, I just still don't understand like what the point of this draft is. It's just it doesn't feel like it's a great
a
use.
formality. It just feels like it feels like a formality. It's just a
Really?
formality. It feels like it's just a formality. It's just a formality.
Wow.
Like I don't know. Like it's just there. Like there's like I said, the contracts a lot of the time, so you don't. It's for guys' draft rights to be acquired. A lot of times, it's just for people's to be able to get the players' G League rights. That's the best way to put it.
Okay.
Their G instead of trading for their G League rights or signing them to an E10, you get their G League rights by nominating to the pool. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that way, instead of you having to go through, for example, a guy like Chandler Hutchinson, or if like Tyler Burton didn't pop his Achilles in the pre-draft process, he probably would have entered the G League draft. And then like Mylan Gardner was another guy who ended up signing a Exhibit 10, or he's on a two-way with I think he's on a two-way now with the Orlando Magic. I think he's actually on an E10, but he's on Osceola. He was drafted by the Wisconsin Herd, and then he was traded to Osceola. So. Dude, Patrick Ewing called multiple GMs last year before the draft to give Myron Gardner a character, like
Vouch.
testimony or whatever. Vouch, yeah, for his character because he had been arrested and kicked out of Georgetown.
Wait, and then Patrick
guy, though.
Ewing
Good guy.
called everyone and was like, "Hey, wait."
Yeah, I
even
said
though
it was
this
like
happened-
it was a huge misunderstanding and like good kid. He is a good kid. He's a good kid. He's actually a really good kid. He's a really good kid.
If I may ask,
going
what
to
did he
be
get
an NBA
arrested
player.
for then?
I believe it was might have been. I don't want to say the wrong. It's you can find it on there. I'll pull it up right now. It's a very. I don't think he ended up. So or dismissed.
Yep.
Like I'm trying to find it right now. Dismissed Georgetown. He was dismissed from Georgetown because. Okay. Anybody want?
I don't know. Sam, while we're waiting for Cyro, if you're
Oh, okay. So it says assault allegations, Myron assault allegations. So supposedly, oh, dude, his teammate was James Akinijo. All right. So basically, court documentations say that what had happened is, where is this Gardner? I don't know if it's sexual harassment. Okay. For instance, that the player been sexually harassed, burglarized. What? The plaintiff asserts that his home was burglarized. Okay, basically, seems like some sort of like assault, harassment type things that led to two or three players leaving the Georgetown for burglary, assault, and harassment. But the case was also dismissed. And then the kid transferred to Little Rock. Either way, nothing on his record. Patrick Ewing basically called teams because that was part of like his intel last year. And like he went to Little Rock, Arkansas, played well, all that good stuff. And basically he just came to vouch for him and just say like, hey, like when you do your like research on him, like this ESPN article and all this stuff is going to come up, and just understand that like he's not a bad kid. Like he's a good kid. And he is. Like this is not on his record, but like obviously, if you Google the guy, it's going to show up. So,
yeah,
that's it.
yeah. Sam, I don't know anything you've heard about this overall process, even just any thoughts on the G League too, about where that kind of is right now, based on people you've talked to, things like that.
I think, as Cyril said, the draft is more like an official. It's they make things official, like he said, a formality. Like they already kind of known already what they're gonna do, and I feel like a lot of the players already kind of know that their agents already told them like, oh, so this is where you're gonna what's gonna happen. It's just gonna become official in like a press release and stuff later. But yeah, I mean, Cyro's a G League guy, so he knows more about what's going on than I really do. So yeah,
Yeah. Is it true, Sierra, right now that the G League is probably more competitive than it's ever been in terms of just like a talent standpoint on a game by game basis?
Did it unmute?
Yeah.
now you're
Yeah,
good
and
now.
unmuted. Okay. So I don't know why it was like lagging, but yeah, definitely. I think the biggest problem we have in the G League is big men, like literally big men. Long talks I have with people is you're looking, so there's not enough talented bigs. That's why if you're basically a 7-footer, you're going to get drafted earlier than you should. But for example, when you got looking at guys like EJ Montgomery, Malik Hall, Trey Jackson, these are all fours in college, and they're really more fours. But you got to play up in the G because there's not enough talented fives. Like Chris Silva for like last year was like the best big man in the league. He's 6'8", and that's the biggest problem. But yeah, it's super talented. It's very guard heavy. The big problem with the G is like you play as soon as you leave the G League and go overseas, you're never coming back to the NBA because they'll forget about you. So basically, if you want to make it to the NBA, you stick in the G for as long as possible because that way you can get a two-way. That's why you see a lot of old heads now, like Tony Snell and other guys, just playing in the G because they've made their bread and they know that if if they really want to get back in the NBA, you just play in the G until then. And it's good. I mean, Lance Stevenson doesn't even want to get back to the NBA. He's just playing the G League because he doesn't want to play overseas, and he just like is enjoying it. And there's tons of guys who are also like that. You'll see a bunch of old heads who are just playing because they like it. I mean, Andre Ingram was in the G League draft this year,
Wow.
and you just got people that I think the biggest lack of talent is at the big man position because there's not all the good bigs go overseas, and all the guard position it's really good and it's talented. And you got guys like DJ Stewart and all this that guys are fighting for two ways. But after like year 3 or 4, if you don't care to stay in the NBA and you really want to get your bag, you've built up enough tape of like dominating the G. That's when you start to head over to Australia or another league that'll pick you up. Spain, France, that'll give you a nice like fatter deal. But I mean, it's a cushy gig. If you're making it, you're making like $70K. You have free room and board basically because the G League takes care of you. If you're on E10, you're making like 120,000. Free health insurance. So it's a cushy gig. Honestly, it's not. It's like it's gotten a lot more competitive just because of the benefits of like what it is, and it's an easier way to get into the NBA. To be honest, and organizations are more and more like putting more and more resources into said teams. So it's legit, and it's a pipeline also for people like myself who are trying to get into scouting and stuff like that. They don't really have scouts or like huge teams. So if you're a person who's like willing to work for free, and you become like closely connected with people and you're like willing to offer like advice and like do work for free, they're more than willing to accept whatever like intel and help they can get because like resources are so limited.
Interesting. Yeah. 70K, that's a lot higher than it was a couple of years ago. I remember hearing the salaries. It was like around 40, I thought. Like 40,
Yeah,
30.
I think I want to say mid 2010s it was 35K G League,
Yeah.
and then dude, yeah, I want to say it's 70K right now. Like that's base, like, and everyone gets paid the same. The only people who get the bonus is if you get the Exhibit 10 contract, and then you stay on the roster for 60 days, and then they give you a 50K bonus. So you end up with like 120, I think it is.
That sounds pretty good to me. That sounds pretty good.
And they provide you health insurance, and they give you an apartment.
Yeah.
You're not living in like the bougie place, but like you're living in a decent place, like in Greensboro or in like Maine, like,
Yeah.
and everything else is provided.
Yeah. That's good. They're making it
And
more competitive. Instead of just guys having to just go overseas, they literally, because I mean, 35K is not even, that's like very hard to live on, especially if you're like in LA or something. It's like, what,
Well, it works out well too that like if you finish the season, you can go play. If you're good enough, you can go play in Puerto Rico or in New Zealand or in Canada during the off season and play between May and August. You can make an extra like $10,000 to $35,000 just playing in one of the foreign short league season. Like New Zealand runs for 8 weeks in June and July. Canada runs from May to August, and I want to say Puerto Rico is the summer, and Puerto Rico's $35,000. I think Canada can be up to $10K a month if you're good enough and the team has money. And then New Zealand, I don't know. I've never talked to anyone who's played in the New Zealand league, but like I know a lot of the Australian guys in their off time they play in the New Zealand league. That's why you'll see they play for an NBL team and then they play for an NZBL team.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of basketball being played all over the place. Cool. I think we can wrap it up here. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode. Do you guys want to let people know where they can find you on socials?
Yeah, for me, it's just literally my name, Cyro Asseo, like everything, CYRO space ASSEO.
Yeah, mine's
For all
Sam Yip
platforms.
_ two underscores on Twitter really. I don't really post too much on there, but that's where you can find me and contact me.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to follow Beyond the Arc podcast on Twitter at Beyond the Arc 8. Make sure to follow me as well at MHO_KJ on Twitter. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you.